There we are. Happy Saturday morning, all. Namaste, all. So we're hopping on live. We're having these occasional lives here at Rasa, especially on some weekends, so that we can come together with various Q&A topics. So we'll just wait a few minutes for some of you to find your way and to hop on. And this morning, the intention of this morning's Q&A around preconception and fertility, in that this month we had Mother's Day. The hope was to focus a little bit here, and I get a lot of questions around this actually. So that's what the intent is for this morning, and we'll just wait for some to hop on, for some questions to come, and then we'll flow from there. Last month we had Q&A that was focused more on digestive issues. So you can always, actually no, that one was on women's health. So in general, so you can always hop onto our IGTV to see these different Q&As that are coming up there, and the various topics that we're covering. Happy Saturday, all. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Nice to see you all. So really, the intent of the space here is for you to put forth any questions that might be of interest to you. And I'm aware that this topic, especially today, around preconception and fertility, might be a topic that either, as a man, we might think, oh, that has nothing to do with me. Or if it's a sensitive topic, we might also feel like, oh, I don't want to ask any questions around that publicly. Or it can also be that maybe right now in our lives isn't a time where we're really focused on fertility or conception, or also there can be so much sensitivity around what may have occurred in our lives, or the possibility of blessings with children. But this is a rich topic that actually preconception, as we widen it out from an Ayurvedic perspective, it can mean absolutely conception as far as a child, but it can also mean for all of us that we can take periods of preconception before we're going to conceive something, give birth to anything, whether it's a child or it's something great in our lives. So in that way, there's much that Ayurveda has to offer around this, that it can actually be a really beautiful teaching for all of our lives in that way. Welcome, good morning. Good morning. Oh, it's so nice to see some familiar faces. Good morning to all of you. So basically with this, any questions that might be there for you, especially around fertility, preconception, this can also be to support people in your lives. You can put them in the chat below. So if there's anything that might be arising for you, particularly as a supportive measure for someone or for yourself, or questions you've been having, this is really what these spaces are intended for us to come together in this deepened learning and support, truly. This is one of the areas that I notice really requires a community. And what I mean by that is that we really become more and more aware of our own struggles, but also the struggles of those around us. And the more versed and the more depth we have in recognizing the various ways that we can be in support and service of our communities, our families, the more we also feel that generosity of contribution. So there's so many ways in which I've noticed as people deepen in the gifts of Ayurveda, or any holism, truly, any holistic, whether it's medicine or living, it really contributes to our feeling that we can be generous at this time, that we're on this planet and in this life, that we can be generous with our knowledge, but also generous with our service, and that we can help those around us. So any questions that are arising, this is really what this time is for. So if no questions arise, then I guess we'll hang out on this Saturday morning. Any questions around fertility, preconception, women's health as it relates to this, anything that might be arising for any of us? This is also, as I was saying when I first hopped on, the intent of this was also was born from the fact that this month we had Mother's Day. And so we're having monthly workshops at Rasa Ayurveda to really help us to apply the gifts of these ancient offerings into life now. And so this month, at the end of the month, so in 2 weeks, I believe it's May 29th, we have a preconception and fertility workshop. So it's a whole day workshop as well. But we wanted to have an open Q&A for those who were hopping on as well. So I'm seeing some questions that are coming in. So I'm seeing a question, what is Ayurveda? Is there any link with the Vedas? Okay, well, this isn't necessarily around preconception, but I'm happy also for us to connect in that. I suppose we probably all, start from this place and have an understanding. But yes, of course, Ayurveda is birthed from the Vedas. And what I mean by that is oftentimes there's misunderstanding as to what the Vedas are or aren't. There's a conception that the Vedas are texts. And yes, the Vedas came to be codified, if I can say it in that way. There's a codification into texts, and we may even delineate those into 4 texts, right? So when we talk about the Rig Veda, the Sama, the Yajur, and the Atharva Veda. But actually, the Vedas, Veda, meaning science or knowing, deep knowing, in the truth of, and great masters have always said this, in the truth of the Vedic tradition, it's said that the Vedas is or are the very wisdom of what it is to be alive. So they're infinite. The Veda is infinite. That knowledge of what it is to be alive is infinite. It lives within the core of every human being. It lives in every breath of life. It's that which animates all of life, all of Prakriti. And so in that way, if you're asking me if it arises from life itself, absolutely. This holism, this recognition that all is interweaved and that medicine is found in everything, but also that we can be in misalignment with life and thus not in alignment with our great naturalness. All of the wisdom of Ayurveda arrives and arises from life itself. Now, Ayurveda, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, truly means this knowing of life, the science of life. So Ayus, the word Ayus, means life. And so Ayurveda means to know life, to know our life, to know what it is to be alive. That's not a little offering, even in the title of it. So in that way, absolutely, it arises from the Vedas, both that it arises from life itself, it arises from the knowledge, the knowing, the great gnosis. When we are more in contact with the great knowing and great experiencing of this very life, of this very existence, it tends to be that we live more in alignment with Ayurveda, whether we know about Ayurveda or not. We live more in alignment with our lives, actually. We live more in alignment with our naturalness, whether we know the concepts of Ayurveda or we don't. So beautifully in that way, yes, it arises from the Vedas and from those 4 texts, if that's what you're referring to as well. Absolutely. We find much of the offerings and beginnings of Ayurveda and of Jyotish, Vedic astrology, and of Sanskrit, and also of yoga and meditation, of Vastu, of all of these great traditions. They all find their arising points, their birth points from those Vedic codifications, those Vedic texts as well. So thank you for that beautiful question. Absolutely. There's so much more we could say, but I think that's enough history for a Saturday. I see that Fatima's asking, what herbs are good for women's health? Oh, goodness. There are so many herbs, and it's dependent upon, and this is the beauty of Ayurveda, is that it really is, and I say this again and again, and I hope that it's not becoming, an over inundation, but it really is a welcoming for all of us to know and to live Ayurveda, which is that Ayurveda is a relational medicine. If Ayurveda means to know life, it means to know each moment, to know our relationship with life in any given moment, to be present to the relationship to life in any given moment. So when we come into that presence with life in any given moment, what happens is that we can no longer give general or generic ideas of what is good and what isn't. So we can no longer have the idea that these things are good and these things are bad for one person or for one group of people or generally in our lives, for the entirety of our lives. Instead, what we come to start understanding is, as Charaka offered, anything, the right thing, can be the right medicine for the right person at the right time. So anything on this planet, the entirety of Prakriti, the entirety of nature, has so much to offer. She has so much that she can offer us that really anything could actually be medicine for the right person at the right time. It's like yesterday I witnessed someone as I was driving here in Canada. I'm in Ontario. And someone was spraying their lawn and it was covered with dandelions. No demonization if you're also doing that, if for some reason, dandelions are your nemesis in this life. But we've been taught that, right? That dandelions are a weed. And so I saw this person spraying the lawn with some kind of pesticide, right? To rid the lawn of the dandelion. So we can have this nice, green, pristine grass, which has very little to offer us, to be very honest, except, of course, a nice place to maybe lie, except there'll be a lot of pesticides on that lawn. So spraying the dandelion, but those dandelions are absolute medicine. Those dandelions can be used to make various things. So whether or not we're drying those dandelions to make a churna, to make a powder, whether we're roasting them, like for example, many of you are familiarized now with dandelion coffee. The benefits that dandelion has also for purifying, for example, the liver and the blood. It's excellent in those ways as a bitter. We can also make a bitter tonic out of it. The way I even saw a recipe the other day, someone making a honey out of dandelion, or dandelion wine, actually, like mead, like honey wine. It can be slightly fermented, and then it can be a wonderful way, actually, to stimulate the digestion. So in this way, anything can be medicine at the right time in the right place, and in Ayurveda or for the right person. But similarly, as Charaka and the great rishis of Ayurveda offered, anything can also be poison at the wrong time for the wrong person. So similarly, that dandelion that could be wonderful for one, for another could be extremely drying, or it could be extremely lekana, it could be extremely scraping internally, and because of that it could contribute to depletion and the loss also of water in the body. So in that way, we need to really think of these things, and herbalism in Ayurveda is relational, it's presence-based. It's that there are certain herbs that we use, and I'm sorry if this feels long-winded, but I just want to make sure that we have, a global understanding of this, a holism of understanding, so you can really be your own doctor in this way. And so in understanding that, there are many, many herbs that we use for women's health, dependent upon the condition of what's going on for a specific person at a specific time. Now, there are certain herbs that have a specific, what we would call a prabhava. And a prabhava is a specificity. So prabhava means that it has a specific action, if I can say it in that way. And there are certain herbs that have specific actions that are wonderful for women's health. And when we say that, we probably mean women's endocrine health, so women's hormonal health, and women's reproductive or sexual health. Because those two spaces, especially, tend to be different than in the male structure. If we think of, for example, respiratory health, it's kind of global, no matter what our gender is. Of course, there's differences, but nevertheless, reproductive and endocrine health, there's a lot of specificity to that, dependent upon if we're man or woman. So in that way, for women's health, we absolutely have some specific herbs, but I don't like to just run them off, because in that way, what we're actually doing is we're coming with an allopathic consciousness and applying it to Ayurveda. And there's a very different consciousness. And actually, I just want to clarify what I mean by that. Let's say a contemporary allopathic consciousness, a contemporary Western medicine application of medicine is symptomatic. Long term, it was never seen as that. Allopathy also has its roots in beautiful holism, actually. But the idea is you have a symptom, apply something, get rid of the symptom, but don't really look at what the root of that is. Don't really recognize that what works for one may actually not work for another. That we really have to take care to be present to the individual in front of us and the conditions that brought them to that disease, that brought them to that imbalance. So in that light, we may use different herbs. But if you're asking the question in general, for women's health, there's one herb that I consistently, and many of you know this if you have some contact with Ayurveda, that we consistently use for endocrine health and also for reproductive health, which are directly tied and related, which is shatavari. And I don't know how many of you have heard of this beautiful herb before, but actually the very name of it means to possess 1,000 husbands. So imagine, that's like a big claim, isn't it? Every time I tell a woman that, when I'm suggesting it, to her to bring balance in one way or another. They're like, oh goodness, Tiffany, I don't know if I can handle more than one, maybe two. So to possess 1,000 husbands, what it really means is it amps up one's femininity. And so in that way, it's estrogenic. So for example, just as I spoke of before, it can be a wonderful herb to balance and bring balance, especially if we have a lot of heat in the structure, excess pitta, if we're having menstrual or menopausal challenges that relate to that. It can be helpful in all of those ways. But actually, if someone deals with an overly estrogenic condition, especially in specific kapha dosha conditions in some women, sometimes shatavari is not something that we'd suggest actually. So instead, we would be suggesting other herbs. So it's interesting for us to know there are herbs, of course, that get, the good rap as being the herbs for women's health. But again, it really requires that they're applied for a specific person at a specific time. And that's why it's always so wonderful to work one-on-one with an Ayurvedic doctor or an Ayurvedic practitioner, whether or not it's myself or another individual, or someone in holistic medicine who can really consider the presence of what's occurring for you. So that's just one of many that we use. At Rasa Ayurveda, we actually have a beautiful potion. We call them potions. We have 12 different formulas. And the one potion that we have that I'm consistently in awe, I have to share with you all, when these original formulations came into being, and I was inspired to offer them and bring them into the world through Rasa Ayurveda, I absolutely had a lot of clinical backing and experience and the blessing of my own teachers and master teachers, and I'm so thankful to all of them and their wisdom. And so, of course, I knew that these things worked, that they had deep and resounding healing benefits. But now it's amazing with Rasa to witness the innumerable testimonials, the notes that we get, the things that we receive about the ways in which people, in this case women, are having freedom in so many ways. Or, for example, today's topic was supposed to be more around fertility. For example, our Wild Woman's Potion, it's amazing to hear the balance with menstruation or the balance with skin conditions that are related to hormonal acne, for example, or women who have been challenged with infertility or postmenopausal challenges, and taking our Wild Woman's Potion and what's occurred for them. So much balance on so many levels. And that formula actually contains shatavari as well as some other adaptogenic herbs, some other amazing rasayana, rejuvenative herbs. And it also contains something that I also love to use, which is more of a Western herb, but I often use it for women's health as well, which is Eleuthero or Siberian ginseng. So this one is also wonderful for women's reproductive and endocrine health. And this adaptogenic blend, I really bow to whatever force allowed these formulas to come so that they can be in service. And so I hope that answers some of your questions around herbs. Let's see what other questions might be arising. I'm seeing that Akal is saying, always wondered the role. I thought it said always wonderful. So always wondered the role of cannabis in Ayurveda. Yeah, so as far as cannabis is concerned, or anything of that sort is concerned, the only time I've really encountered it is we have slight forms of bhang, which is like, I'm not so versed on psychotropics, and I get a lot of questions today about some of these, so I have to say this is not my place of being so versed. But as far as cannabis and CBT or CBD and all of these things, there are more and more Ayurvedic companies, or there are CBD companies that are using Ayurveda, combining things. This wasn't so traditionally seen. But what we do see is we see some references of including bhang, of including hash, or including shake, that would then be decocted, basically, into something like mead, like into a fermented honey, into an alkalized honey, or done in a decoction form, if I can call it that in English. So decocted, and then a micro dose of that would be added to a further formula, so a whole heap of various herbs, and then this would be made into a further decoction, for example, an asava, or it would be made into tablets as well. So we would find that it was offered also in a vati, in a tablet. But there would be such almost like a homeopathic dosage of that. So I'm thinking of one that my master teacher, beautiful Ayurvedic Guruji, Dr. Vasant Lad, introduced me to in clinical practice, which is called prasham. And prasham is a mixture of various herbs, including a very small microdose of bhang in it that helps really with anxiety in many ways, and helps with a heightened nervous system, if I can call it in that way. So it really is a nervine sedative or a nervine tonic blend. But such a microdose, so I even myself have taken that and I never felt high from it. So other than that, there's a lot of ideas that cannabis is used, or there's a lot of misunderstanding around also the images of some of the deities, of some of the gods and goddesses, but especially the gods in the Vedas, as though, they were smoking chillam all the time. This is a real misunderstanding of all of this. So traditionally in Ayurveda, there wasn't a whole host of offerings around using these substances, especially not to get high. Let me be really, really clear on that. As I said before, everything in Ayurveda, the entirety of Prakriti, so the entirety of nature, is seen as no mistake. So let's be really, really clear on that. That everything has been born for a reason. It has its great purposefulness on this planet. And in that light, if everything has been born as no mistake, and you're like, well, my brother's a bit of a mistake, or no mistake, nothing is a mistake, right? The guy I saw on the highway the other day is a bit of a mistake. So of course we have this aversive consciousness to things. Or, even let's think about stinging nettles. I'm looking this way because this is the window. The window is here. Let's think about stinging nettles. Some of us, when we get stung by a nettle, if we've ever touched a nettle, you might think, well, that's a mistake, Tiffany. Stinging nettles are a mistake. Stinging nettles have amazing, amazing medicinal properties. And when they're ingested in a specific way, when we can ingest them, then they absolutely have so much benefit. And even the sting of them can be actually wonderful as an antihistamine. So there are wonderful ways in which things, even those which seem like they might be a bit of a mistake, actually have their benefit and they have their necessity on this planet, of course. So in that light as well, of course, these plants also have their place and they have their medicinal benefit. Absolutely. But it's also not just about the dravya guna, about the substance. So in Ayurveda, we look at the substance and the quality of the substance of that which is offered by nature. How does the quality of that, the elements of it, affect the elements of the specific individual? So for example, my constitution has more pitta. If I am eating, really spicy food and engaged in a lot of sunbathing, etc., not so wonderful for my constitution. A little bit here and there, because I also love sometimes a little bit of pickle or a little bit of spicy food. But really, for my constitution, it's something that's not as beneficial. But someone else who has more density, more kapha in their structure, has more, water retention and holding of water in their system, they have a little bit more spice in their food, a little bit more sunbathing, and it's wonderful medicine for them, in fact. So in the same way, these psychotropic plants or hallucinogenic plants, there's the dravya guna, the substance of it, which they can have certain calming properties, etc. Absolutely, no mistake. There's a reason. And even the fibers of them can be used. Many of you are probably more versed in this than I am. There are ways in which that dravya guna, the substantial qualities of it, can be very medicinal in specific ways for individuals. Like yesterday, I was just given some information actually by a client in which there's some studies about psilocybin, about derivatives from mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms and psychotropic mushrooms, that are seen to be 4 times more effective, actually, than any antidepressant on the market currently. Very interesting. I didn't know this. I intend to do more research about this as well. I'm interested to know more about what this is. It's not necessarily that I'm sitting here promoting, because we really, at Rasa, we really don't include any CBD in anything. But again, the more open we are to life, and the more open we are to seeing the freedom of all beings, the more we also see that all of life is offering. It's offering medicine. So over the years, I'm really open to seeing what's going to help, at the utmost to my clients and patients and to the individuals around me. So I'm always learning, and there's something about that also. When we know, then we are definitely in a place of ignorance. So when we're in great knowership, it's great avidya, it's great ignorance, because everything is always changing. There's a changing nature to life, and in that changing nature, we need to be constantly taught. There's a certain beginner's mind, and that really is wisdomful in that way. So in talking about some of these things like cannabis, there's that dravya guna, the substance and its qualities, but then there's also the relationship with. And both of those need to be considered. So we can get addicted to things even that aren't addictive. And this is, I think this is so important for us to recognize that, we can get addicted. For example, we're seeing that there is more and more obsession about health to the point of something called orthorexia. And orthorexia really is an obsessive, it's a pathology, so a mental pathology, mental health condition really, around being obsessed around health foods, being healthy, to the point that we're constantly, whether it's constantly on Google or we're constantly, at the shop looking for food and we can't leave, after 3 hours and we hardly have anything in our cart. These kinds of, this kind of obsessive, almost like OCD around our healthfulness can really cause a lot of imbalance. So similarly, the relationship needs to be considered. What's our relationship to anything? Not just something like cannabis, but what's our relationship to all parts of our life? Is freedom in anything that we're engaged in our lifestyle, in our diet, and also in our medicines, so in our herbs that we might be taking. So if there's an obsessive or an addictive relationship, then that in and of itself is a poisonous relationship, which is not bringing medicine. So the plant may bring medicine, but the relationship is something that also has to be considered. So that's a whole host of things. And actually, when we talk about fertility and preconception, that's one of the things that we actually do in a preconception time, not just with a woman, but also with the couple, is to look at the relationship between, but also the relationship with our diet, with our lifestyle, and using any kinds of herbs in both our coupledom, but also individually, so that we can really amplify a freedom, a flow of freedom of ojas, of vital energy, within each of us and also within the couple. And that this will allow really open to, and also, a flow of ojas towards our spiritual invitation to a soul as well. So we use various things to really open up that relationship and bring purity to that relationship during a time of preconception. So I'm just shifting it so we can focus a little bit there. But it's an awesome question, so thank you for asking that. I see also Sonia. Hi, Sonia. She's asking the question, do you see Yoga Nidra being used as a tool for fertility, birth, labor, etc.? Absolutely. So Yoga Nidra, and yoga in general is part of Ayurveda. It's not separate. It's part actually of, as I was mentioning before, we have sort of these three chikitsas, not sort of, but we do. 3 chikitsas in Ayurveda, and chikitsa means treatment or medicine. So for anything, we apply these 3 specific treatments. And the first is diet, ahara. The second is lifestyle, vihara. And the third, oshadi, is medicine, or what we would call herbalism, or also we could even say 5 sense therapy, like how we receive the plants through and how we receive life through the 5 senses. And so in that way, in the second, in lifestyle, vihara, yoga and meditation are a huge part of that. They're a huge part of the focus of that. So when we at Rasa Ayurveda, whenever we offer various suggestions around health and balance based upon Ayurveda, we always include also some of the gifts from yoga, some of the gifts from meditation, some of the gifts from self-inquiry, from Atma Vichara, because these are so important. And Yoga Nidra, the yoga of, let's call it in many ways what it's called, which is sleep, because often Yoga Nidra gets translated as deep relaxation or the yoga of relaxation. One of the 3 pillars of good health in Ayurveda is sleep or rest. So Yoga Nidra, and the other 2 are diet and actually right sexuality. So right relationship with our sex. So diet as well as sleep and sex. So with right rest, Yoga Nidra really teaches us how to come into a depth of right restfulness. how to really rest in great wakefulness, actually, how to be awake to our restfulness, how to remain or maintain our presence even while we rest, not to just go into comatose or unconscious states, and how to uproot some of the unconscious samskaras that during our sleep are often being processed. But when we go into sleep with a certain depth and awareness, when we allow ourselves to deepen into the deeper states, and in yoga and Ayurveda, we talk about the 4 states, the first being waking, and then we go into dream state and deeper sleep, and eventually Turiya, which is really a profound wakefulness during the sleep. When we can really travel into that with a depth of awareness, there's so much alchemy that happens in our structure. There's a great alchemy that can occur here. And because of that, we can have deep and restful sleep, but we can also start to bring much, much more conscious awareness into our lives. And we can uproot some of our subconscious and unconscious patterns and habits, what we would call our samskaras, our old habits and things that are, hooking us to certain patterns and tendencies in our lives. So yoga nidra, knowing how to access those deeper, calm, present states of awareness, to really be in the calmness of our own beingness, is so profound for fertility, because most of us are in our waking state, and I'm doing this because we're in the constant fluctuations of our waking state and we're not really in our calm presence. So when we learn through yoga nidra how to deepen into that, that also starts to allow, and I'm going to say it in that way, it allows our embodiment, it allows this body and its energy to come into its own natural balance. It's not like we have to force it or push it or make it happen, but rather when we deepen into our own restfulness, so much of its own accord comes back into balance. And we see that, right, with great sleep. How many of you recognize that? When you have a great sleep, how do you feel the next day? How do you eat? What do you decide to do? What does exercise look like? So yoga nidra, even if it's a practice during the day of 30 or 40 minutes of this deep and profound restfulness, this is like a renewal for our entire system, and it's a renewal in which we tap into our greatest naturalness. And when we tap into that, that's wonderful for fertility. That can be amazing for birth. It's amazing to see what can happen during birth if a woman is able to access and be in that, actually, and also for labor. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, Sonia, and I really feel, and Sonia does so much work also around birth and pregnancy, both pre and postnatal, and working with moms and babies. So I'm so glad that you have more and more touching into yoga nidra and more sharing of this. So absolutely, women, for preconception also. So if we are trying to conceive as a couple as well, but also as a woman, it can be so powerful to start to deepen in your own yoga nidra. And there are some beautiful teachers out there of yoga nidra, and there are some wonderful YouTubes. We have a beautiful woman in our community, Ali Boothroyd. You can check out Saravara Yoga, who really has, an impassioned, she did a 300-hour teacher training with me, and she's impassioned about offering yoga nidra to the world. So she has a great YouTube with lots of yoga nidras out there that I would absolutely suggest. It was so wonderful for preconception and fertility. I'm seeing also, a beautiful friend of Ali. So I'm seeing Tina is here as well. Hi, Tina. So she's offering, hi, would the Wild Women's Potion that you make be a good support for preconception and fertility health? It absolutely is. And I see that she's saying, would you recommend the Wild Women's Potion be taken on an empty stomach, first thing in the morning, or any other particular time? So I suggest that it be taken, you see, the Anupana, the carrier, so the thing we put the herbs into, is also really important. So we have these understandings in Ayurveda of what we would call Brahmana, that which nourishes and builds, and that which is Langana, which means that which actually reduces or depletes. So if we're wanting to take an herb that builds and nourishes, which is absolutely the Wild Women's Potion, then we want to use an Anupana that's Brahmana. What does that mean? We want to use a carrier, and I hope the Sanskrit is interesting for you all, but you can always ask questions as well, okay? And don't let it be intimidating. I'm just sharing that because some of you are really turned on by it. It's exciting, to understand the terminology as well. So this Brahmana, the building or the nourishing, to give Brahman, to give Brahma, to give creation to. Anupana's carriers that are more building are things like milk, whether that's a non-dairy milk, things that have creamy, unctuous, more heavy sweetness to them. So something like a milk and something that's warm. So a warm milk, whether it's a warm non-dairy milk like a hemp milk, for example, or if it's a warm also rice milk. These are wonderful milks, or oat milk. I know a lot of us love oat milk right now. It's become a thing, and it's also quite localized here in Canada. You can you have your own Canadian grown oats and even make your own oat milk. So, or buy your own oat milk. So warming it up a little bit, whether you warm that on the stovetop, or an easy idea for doing this is to take half a cup of the milk out of the fridge and then half a cup of boiling or hot water. And when you mix those together, the milk's a little less thick, but you also get a nice warmth to that. Or adding 1/3 as well, 2/3 of the milk and 1/3 of the hot water. And then adding the Wild Woman's Potion to that. Now again, I said it before, I don't know if you were here, Tina, but dependent upon each individual, we really look at what might be the best preconception. You see, for some women actually, and for most of us actually, the preconception period, so just to be really clear on this, before we conceive, so before we even come to the moment of conceiving, in Ayurveda, we suggest taking a period of preparation. It's almost like in Ayurveda, we have 5 trimesters. So it's not trimester anymore. We have 5 mesters. And so we have these 5 periods. We have a preconception period, then we may have the 3 trimesters, and then we also have a postnatal period. And these 2 periods, these bookend periods in Ayurveda, are so, so important for mama, for couple, but also for the baby. So for that one that we are inviting. And it's been such a blessing of mine to both learn this and also to share this with other women and to really notice the effect that it's had for the mother, for the birth mother, for the coupledom, so for the partnership, and also for the child that's born as well. To be very, very honest, when we start following some of these things, there's a real difference that starts to happen. So in that preconception period, it's suggested that we take a little period firstly of Langana actually, and so Langana again means reduction or depletion or releasing. So it really means cleansing. That all of us, so the individuals, mom, dad, and the coupledom, can take a little period to clean and clear out. To clear out, whether it's, clear out things, toxicity, Amma, as we call it, undigested stuff physically, or maybe it's mentally, emotionally that's blocking fertility, or even if fertility isn't blocked, if I can say it in that way. Just that we want to be as clear and clean as we can possibly be when we come to the moment of conception. In our coupledom, if there's limiting beliefs or if there's stuff that we need to clear and clean, or if also in our home, so we take a little period at the beginning of preconception actually of Langana, of cleansing. And when you work with an Ayurvedic doctor or a practitioner, we really work in this way. And I usually suggest that a preconception period be about 6 months. And we will talk about this more in the workshop that's coming up in 2 weeks. Today we have 15 more minutes together. So I get a little bit of time to be with you all. And I hope that this is a gift to you even this time if you're not able to attend the workshop. But those first 3 months, if a woman is fairly balanced, isn't dealing with a major vitiation, a major imbalance, most of us, for our constitution, whether it's Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, we can have a little period of Langana, of release, of cleanse, and then a period of Brahmana, then a period of building and nourishing. So it's like, we don't just build a house on a foundation that is rotting or has termites, etc. We've got to go to the foundation, make sure things are cleansed out, cleared out, dealt with, and then we build the foundation back up and we start to build on that. In the same way, we want to cleanse and clarify the body, the system, the mind, the coupledom, the space. And then we want to build the mind, the body, the coupledom, and the space between us and also, in our home, etc. And so Langana and Brahmana. So the Wild Woman's Potion is wonderful as a Brahmana. So it's wonderful for building and nourishing. But for some of us, depending upon our constitution and depending upon our Vikruti, depending upon any current imbalances, we might actually find that we need to do a bit of Langana, which means we need to do some cleansing, use some cleansing herbs first. For example, a lot of us may have taxed our liver, and our liver has a huge relationship to pregnancy and fertility. So cleansing our liver can be very, very important. And many of you are going, yeah, like I keep telling myself, I'll stop drinking when I get pregnant. This is a very Western concept. This is a very, very Western concept. The idea that when I get pregnant, I'll stop these things. But actually, this is contributing to our fertility. It's contributing to the preparation to our fertility. This may be triggering for some of us even to hear it, because when we hear about the things we may have to let go of, it might bring some things up. I know this isn't your case, Tina, but I'm just bringing this up for all of us. So in that case, actually doing something like using our liver scrub potion can be wonderful to prepare firstly. We do some langana, and the anupanna, the carrier, would be something that's also more cleansing, like aloe vera juice, for example, is wonderful, or cleanse and clarify tea. I'll often suggest to women and even men as well who are preparing for or working in preconception, preparing for fertility and for conception, to take a period, even just 1 month, of taking our liver scrub potion in our cleanse and clarify tea, drinking the cleanse and clarify tea fairly regularly, doing some other things. There's a whole host of things, and like I said, we'll get more into those in the workshop. But moving through those, and then starting to build with the Wild Women's Potion. Now, if a woman is more dealing with a depleted condition, if we have more vata in our constitution, and if we're dealing with more vata depletion in general, so we feel that we're more depleted, maybe we're feeling a bit more scattered, the body is thin, there's more frailness to us, we generally deal with dryness, then starting immediately with a Wild Women's Potion towards fertility can actually be very, very helpful. We may not need to do so much cleansing, actually. We might need to do building right away. So of course it depends on each one of us, but most of us can absolutely benefit from doing a bit of cleansing and then moving towards building and nourishing. I hope that's helpful. And as far as timing, Tina was asking this question, absolutely, on an empty stomach, especially when the carrier, the anupanna, is a milk. It's good for us to do it on an empty stomach. A little bit of milk with honey or maple syrup, I suggest. Bringing the sweet element into it, bringing the sweet rasa is so important as well. So with a little bit of milk or honey, and then, excuse me, and then taking it on an empty stomach, because mixing it with food can just be a lot, for us to mix that. So once in the morning and once in the afternoon can be really wonderful to take on an empty stomach. I'm going to continue to look to see if we have any other questions, and we have a few minutes left. And Sonia was saying she was thinking of scripts with a fertility theme for Yoga Nidra, and I just love that. I think that's a beautiful idea. And Sonia, if you make those, or if you do those, please share those with us. Maybe we could make a blog of those on Rasa Ayurveda. You could do a contributor blog of recordings, or also of those guided yoga nidras. That would be just wonderful for fertility. And Sonia is also asking 3 months for preconception. If we can do it, everyone, I really suggest 6 months. 6 months kind of compartmentalized into 3 months of more clearing and cleansing, and 3 months of more building and nourishing. But again, when I work individually with people, it depends. So for some, I might do 1 month, like I said before, of more cleansing and 5 months of building. And for others, I may do 4 months of cleansing and 2 months, for example, of building and nourishing. It really always depends in Ayurveda. You see, so much of our conception and our fertility is dependent upon really 3 things. There's so many things, but let's say 3 specifically. 1 is the level of Amma in our system. And this is not just fertility. This is for any kind of pathology management, or let's say pathology work or medicine as well. So the first is Amma. How much undigested or toxicity has been built up, stored in the system? We always have to consider that. That's for physical health, but also mental, emotional health. How much Amma is maybe at the mind as well. So that's firstly. Secondly, we want to also look at what is the Ojas. So what's happening as far as one's Ojas. So Ojas means really our vitality. So what's going on in one's vital force? And is someone, do we have a strong vitality? And those two have a relationship, of course, Amma and Ojas. They have, quite a strong relationship between the two of them. So what's happening in our Ojas? And then also, thirdly, there are different things, if I were to say it. There are different things that I look at as the third one, but I absolutely look at Manasaroga, which means really looking at what our mental health is. and really considering deeply what's happening at a mental level. This is not just a physiological thing. So Ojas and Amma also apply to what's going on mentally, emotionally. What is really occurring in our mental health and in our emotional health currently, and what can be done on that level to really allow balance to lay there, to come back to our balanced state there as well. So dependent upon those things, really focusing on, and if we can give a good 6-month period for preconception, then this is really wonderful. And a lot of people ask the question, how do we decide the time of conception or the period of conception? Besides that, we know, we track and we maybe find out when our ovulation is, etc. But actually, classically in the Vedas, the moment of conception is actually decided by muhurta. It's decided by a timing, which is decided by looking at the chart or looking at the correspondence of the couple. So in classical Jyotish, in classical Vedic astrology, which is not like this predictive, of course it can be, but it's not a predictive astrology, which is really, about attracting the best things in your life, or, we often have a real misunderstanding around astrology. Jyotish really helps us understand the karmic imprints of our lives. It helps us understand also our medical astrology, why we have certain propensities, and how we can, with those certain propensities, really, really start to bring a neutrality to our karma. This is ultimately what Jyotish has to offer us. Obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, maybe I can say it in this way. When we start to move beyond our karmic imprints, when we start to recognize the depth of our beingness, we're no longer subject, actually, to many of the karmic imprints of our natal chart. We notice that those tendencies or those propensities aren't chains or bondages anymore. But when we go to conceive, it can be very, very helpful for the couple to actually meet with a Jyotishi, to meet with a Vedic astrologer, who can see the alignments of those two beings. Just like in Ayurveda, we look at the alignments of the doshas of a couple as well. But to see the chart, the karmic alignments, the planetary alignments of those two beings, and to see when is the most auspicious, when's the most perfect timings, time of day, but also time of year, season. It can be an exact day, in fact, when is the best time for us to conceive. This is a very powerful practice to do. And you can do the same thing for anything you're hoping to conceive, actually. So if you're hoping to conceive, to birth a new great dharma, a new great purpose, or something wonderful that you're wanting to bring onto the planet, or a new program, or you're birthing a new business, or you're starting something, it can be wonderful to see when is the most auspicious day to do that. So sort of deciding 6 months around or before that date actually is very, very powerful to do. And one of my dearest friends, and also a beautiful Vedic astrologer, and also, let me just say, Pundit, just a great, amazing, wise Vedic scholar, is my dear friend Ram Vakalanka. And you'll see I've done various on my own. If you look on my own Instagram as well, so tiffany.nicholson.smith, you'll find some joint IGTVs I've done along with him. But look up Ram Vakalanka, and having sessions with him can be so wonderfully helpful around fertility as well. Oh, I see Mary is here as well. Oh, loving you, Mary. And I'm so thankful also for all the opportunities to sit together as well. And Yella is offering, would the cleansing time also help your partner as well? Absolutely. So here's the thing, I see there's a lot of ladies, but I'm also a big shout out to all the men who are here as well. This is a joint participation in whatever way this is happening. And even I share this as well for those of us who do surrogacy, and there's some of you actually on the call, or for those of us who are choosing pregnancy in other ways and other modes. And what I mean by that is through donorship or whatever it might be. It is important, according to Ayurveda, that there be a participation and a recognition of what's happening in the male structure as well. And so actually there are 4 things in preconception that we really, or 4 things during pregnancy also, but in preconception that we really focus on. I talked about the 3 that I'm looking at as far as Amma, Ojas, and mental health. But 4 things that in Ayurveda we really outline are important. And one of those is actually the bija, the seed. So what's the health of the seed of the ovum and also the seed of the sperm? So really looking at those two. And so of course the seed of the ovum and also, the seed of the sperm, both of those need to be healthy. And I can't tell you how many times I have had situations where women have come to me thinking that it's something they're doing wrong, and I've had to point to them that I think more needs to be focused upon also in the male structure and what's happening in her partner's structure and what's happening also with his seed. So it can be the seed. The other thing that we look at, so of these four, is the kshetra, which is the field. So we have the bija, the seed, the kshetra, which is the field between us. So it can be, or let me say the field, which is both the field between the couple. So what's the field? What's our relationship like? I have seen many times that fertility is hindered due to the fact that there are blockages in the relationship. There's, and when I say blockages, there's disharmony, or there's blockage in the settlement of the space, like having a place where we can really settle and where a child can be invited. Or, the kshetra, the field, can also be the field of what's happening in the world at that time, the field of the world, which of course many of us are thinking about right now, thinking, oh my goodness, what a field, to invite a child into. And so really considering what the timing is. Also, when we think about field, we also think about the field of the seasons. So, the best time, of course, there's something to the springtime, the growth time of spring versus the fall, not as wonderful a time for us to be conceiving. So the field is also very important, but the field also of one's physical health, whether that's the woman or the man, and also the field of the uterus, but also the field, of course, of the man, generally of his physical field, his emotional, mental field, that all contributes to fertility. So that can also be either a hindrance or it can be a great boon. It can be a great blessing for fertility. So we have the bija, we have the kshetra, we have the seed, we also have the field. And then we also have the ambu, so the waters. And in both men and women, of course, for a man, there is the seed, the bija of the sperm, but there can also be the motility. So there can be the literal, and I'm doing this because it's whether or not that sperm is flowing, to be very honest. And so sometimes, the quality cannot be so great, but the quantity could be good. Sometimes quantity and quality could be fairly good, but there's a good formation of the sperm, for example, but the motility is not so great. So the ambu, the water, is also the water of the rasa, the lymph system of the woman, and also the field of the uterus and the endometrial lining and all of that, how it's also supplied by water and blood and the waters of our being. But also in the man, that motility also has something to do with the ambu, with the water as well. So that's really important for us to recognize. And then the fourth, and also let's think of water as the flow. So that's even the flow between us. Water relates also to emotionality. So the flow, the emotional availability in the coupledom, also really important. And then the fourth is the muhurta, the timing. So that also has to do with season, so I said, kshetra, field, is also about season, but this is even more about season and right timing. So when we're making love, for example, when we decide to conceive, at what time we are also in our lives. Of course, it's not so wonderful for the muhurta, the timing to conceive, if it's after 60, that would be almost impossible for most women, as we know. And so, of course, men, there's still the capacity for that. But of course, we know timing and right timing even boils down to that. There's certain fertile years. But also that there be right timing in our lives, that we be in a good place in our lives, that there not be excessive stress, etc. Right? So all of these things, these four things, are what we traditionally consider. And of course, those all involve the man. And so when I sit with couples around preconception and around preconception sadhana, preconception practice, so often the woman will come to me, but I'll say, is the man yearning to also be a participant? Because there's much that we can do. Liver cleansing for the man as well can be very, very important for the quality of the bija, the quality of the sperm, the quality of the motility, and also just the quality of his health to be a papa as well. I mean, all of those things relate to the quality of also his anger and what might be entering into the space between us. You see, there's so many ways in which the man also needs to be involved in this. Okay, we are at time, but I want to just see if there's any last things. I see that it looks like we've concluded in general with questions. It's a joy to be together, as always, in these ways. I'm always so touched to see through the Q&As what comes out. And this is why we're really doing it in this way. And every month we're going to have different Q&As with topic focus. In the past, we were having Q&As that were just kind of open. But now we're going to, lay forth a topic and then really invite you to come with any of your questions around that topic. And so I really hope that this is of service to you and that it will flow beyond. And my only request is that you share this, that you live it, and then that you share it as well. So please share this. This is the intent. These are free and they're widely spreadable and shareable. So these will always be on IGTV as well as hopefully as well. They will be up on our YouTube. So our YouTube will continue to grow. It hasn't been growing thus far, but we will grow it at Ross Ayurveda. And so please do share these so that they can benefit and the gift of Ayurveda can enter so many lives. So much love, blessings, holding each and every one of you in the heart, feeling very touched about the growing Sangha, the growing community that we have here at Ross Ayurveda. And have a beautiful, beautiful weekend, a beautiful Saturday, wherever you are on the planet at this time. And we'll see each other again soon. And in a couple of weeks, if you're wanting to deepen into this for your own practice and to really be live together, we will have a live, online, live Zoom workshop, 6 hours, beautiful workshop encompassing various things, also practices, a lot of things around preconception and fertility, which will happen 2 weeks from now. So check that out also in our upcoming offerings. Okay, love to all of you. Namaste. Have a beautiful weekend. Take care, everyone.